it's a fascinating move. This comes, 1 week after the president announced his nominee to be permanent director, Steve Dettelbuck, another who's a former U.S. attorney and Democratic candidate for AG. But I don't know, what's your first reaction to all this? What do you think about it?
My first reaction is this may be like the first moment of genuine surprise that I've had with the Biden administration. Like, I wasn't surprised to see them nominate David Chipman as ATF director. I was pleasantly surprised to see Chipman's nomination fail, but that wasn't because of that wasn't a move by the Biden administration. This really was surprising to me because, Marvin Richardson, as you know, was planning on retiring, I believe, at the end of the year, if not beforehand. So, here's a guy who was already on his way out the door. The earliest they're talking about confirming Steve Bettleman, is it Dettelbach? Dettelbach, yeah. The earliest that they're talking about confirming him I've seen from the White House is like the fall. So
yeah, I thought that was weird too,
right?
Honestly.
And if you think about it, so now you get rid of Marvin Richardson. And as you reported, and I think this is also really important, a couple of top deputies are leaving too. So Richardson gets demoted down to deputy director. So he's going to, supposedly stick around as, part of the institutional knowledge. And then you get Restano in there as the interim director. There's going to be this huge leadership vacuum. I mean, the idea that some interim director is going to be able to turn around this troubled agency in 6 months or 4 months, and then you're going to have somebody permanent come in. It's just absurd. I mean, this is going to throw the ATF into even more chaos in the short term, I would think. So the idea that, well, this is going to light a fire under the ATF, show the renewed focus for the agency, I think it actually is probably going to do the exact opposite. To me, what this is pure pandering to the gun control lobby on the part of the Biden administration. This came a few days after, I think it was the AP ran a big story about, disgruntled anti-gun activists like David Hogg who, don't feel like Biden has done enough. I think this is throwing the gun control groups a bone named Marvin Richardson. And it looks like the gun control lobby is happy to, gnaw on that bone for a while.
It's weird, though, to me. I think you're right as far as the motivation for it. Richardson was effectively, personally, his leadership was attacked in the New York Times back in March and really the complaints about it. I mean, I don't, maybe that's just from where we're coming from, but to me, they seem pretty superfluous. I mean, they complain that he went to SHOT Show, which is something the ATF always does. Right. It wasn't some new policy from Marvin Richardson. And they complained that the ghost gun rule wasn't getting implemented fast enough because it was initially it was going to be published in June instead of March, instead of April. So that's like,
which, by the way,
months.
It still has not been published. It still has not been published in the Federal Register. Try to find it in the Federal Register. It's not there. They held a press conference. They had the dog and pony show. But it has still not been published. The 120-day clock, or 90 days, again, we don't know because it hasn't been published, but the clock has not started ticking yet. So, which to me is another very interesting fact.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Now, I'm going to look it up. That was accurate as of Wednesday afternoon, but I'm going to look it up as we're talking here.
That is important, too, because it only becomes relevant once it's actually published in the Register, not when they make a press announcement. Right. Of course. So that is fascinating. And the thing about the complaint over that, too, is like, the June timeline was not out of the ordinary for a federal rule. Federal rules take a year and a half to actually get done and finalized, especially when there's hundreds of thousands of comments that the ATF has to respond to, like they did in this case. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm looking here. And no, the last thing that was published in the Federal Register dealing with the ATF was a proposed e-collection of e-comments requested for the ATF Citizens Academy on April 18th. That's it. So, yeah, it is
slightly less controversial one.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah. I mean, again, this is all been, I think, a dog and pony show designed to mollify gun control activists and by design, I think, tried at this point not even energize the Democratic base, but just to give them some reason to go out and vote in November, because I think Biden Democrats are just terrified about what's going to happen in the midterms. And, you know, they know they're not going to get the vote of gun owners. I mean, they know that vote's lost. All you got to do is look at the, election results in Virginia and see how Terry McAuliffe fared in rural counties. So I think this is, a pure political pander at the expense of our Second Amendment rights, by the way, and at the expense of Marvin Richardson's career.